So, what are we here to talk about? The web. I think that we've got this picture of the web, which is kind of a generated thing showing the topology of all the different endpoints on the internet today. And I think it's maybe one of the most fascinating human creations that we have. What we've seen in terms of explosion of information over the last 20 years as the web's gone mainstream has been spectacular. And I think probably in this room, but certainly across the whole business landscape, there's varying levels of understanding of what's going on with the web, but we all know how important it is to the point where it's almost like a utility. It's hard to imagine going back in time. When I think back 20 years and think about what we would do to find directions to go somewhere or to carry out banking, all these different things, it's just changed everything. And also when we think of the web, I think a lot of times the most tangible thing to think about is websites. And this is a picture of what the Netscape website looked like back in 1997. Netscape, of course, at that time was like by far the leading browser technology, and browsers became synonymous with the web, right? We all think about, okay, when I use the web, that means I'm going to a browser and I'm putting in a web URL and I'm going to a site. But the reality is that there's a lot more to the web than just browser-based interactions, right? What we've seen pretty much since the inception of the web, although it was much more underground, certainly more publicly from about 2000 onward, and then very much increasingly with the explosion of the mobile app movement, is this notion of web APIs. So although you can consider, when you go to a browser and you click that URL into the browser, it's actually making calls and getting data back, which happens to be data that you can put into a browser and it renders in the browser. But really that's an API. That's an interface that's giving you data. But beyond the browser APIs, we've seen service APIs which do things for you. We probably like Salesforce and Facebook and Google and Amazon and so on have these APIs that you can go out and they're very tangible. Data APIs, which are now becoming popular, where you might have big data sets and you just want to make that data available, or you want to be able to collect data from different sources. And now management APIs, which kind of take it to the next level, where you're a lot of cloud-based computing. Amazon, when you're using Amazon Web Services for cloud-based computing, you're interacting with that through APIs in a way that allows you to do things in an automated fashion, self-service. So although the most visual and tangible entry point for the web is through browsers, we have all of these other interfaces available, and we've seen how businesses like the ones that I mentioned and Twitter and companies like Twilio that have been founded as API companies themselves, are able to service all these different needs. Like I said, I think the big shift and the most tangible shift is whenever you're using your smartphone and you're using apps on the smartphone, the interaction with the web is all done through APIs. And so unless you're using some, and maybe you are, some very simplistic video game or something, then pretty much every other app has APIs connecting back to the back. So, but more than the technology itself, I think the reason that we're here to talk is because there's a lot of power in that, the opportunity that's presented by APIs, right? It's a way that you can help expand your reach. If you want to reach that captive audience on the social network, or if you want to, have a way of broadcasting your content more broadly to all possible channels, you've got APIs to do that. If you want a way of integrating, your internal systems and external systems, a way of having a pluggable platform for your services, you can use APIs. If you want to get more information and data about different entities or identities, you can use APIs to do that. If there's great examples like Google Maps where, if you have a very valuable service, you can charge for it. You can build a direct revenue channel. But more frequently, you can drive your own business model, use APIs as a force multiplier to help extend and increase the revenue coming through your existing channels. And of course, innovation, right? I think if you look at the open API movement that we've seen, it's a way of presenting your services out to a community of innovators that you might not even know today, that will come in and use your services and come up with ideas in a crowdsourced way that you might not be able to currently. So it's really about that opportunity. So I talked about the API Academy. You know, we're a group that helps companies look into their API strategies, look at their API architecture, all the best practices around how to be successful with APIs. And we have this API360 framework, and you know, oh, I did forget to mention, although it might be subliminally affecting you already. Feel free to tweet today, pictures. We've got some books to give away for people who are most active on Twitter using the hashtag API360. But the API360 as a concept is really about saying, we recognize that every company has its own unique challenges and its own history and its own industry. And not every company can just start from scratch and turn themselves into a web company like Amazon, for example. But there are things that we can learn there. And the way that we approach this is through this API360 framework that looks at kind of the business side of things, and then the design and developer engagement side, the architecture, and then the platform concepts to help you cover the full spectrum of needs around being successful with APIs.